Chapter 897. At this time, Chu Xiu had no idea what was going on in the outside world, because he was dreaming. That dream was very strange. He actually dreamed of all kinds of memories from his previous life on Earth. It was very real, but in the end he dreamed of two people. One of them was Dugu Weiwa, who had once appeared in his illusion. Dugu Weiwa was in the middle of a boundless sea of blood, and he was like a demonic god. His entire body was enveloped by extreme negative emotions, and it was as if he was the master of this Yellow Springs blood sea. Countless evil spirits wailed beneath his feet. But at the same time he saw another scene. Dugu Weiwa was actually tied up in a huge palace. Dragon-shaped chains were wrapped around his forelimbs, waist and abdomen. The chains were tightly constricting, as if they were afraid that he would escape. At the same time, there were all kinds of forces in the palace blasting his body. Ice, wind, thunder, fire, yin, and yang were simply endless. But at this time, Dugu Weiwei was laughing wildly. It was a kind of laughter that contained arrogance, mockery, and other emotions. It was incomparably heroic. Although he had the same face as Dugu Weiwei in the Sea of Blood, his temperament was completely different, as if they were two different people. Just as Chu Xiu was about to get closer to see what the palace that imprisoned him looked like, he suddenly woke up. "Young Master Chu, you're finally awake." Mu Ziyi was guarding Chu Xiu, and seeing that Chu Xiu had woken up, her eyes immediately showed a look of surprise. Rubbing his head, Chu Xiu took a cup of water from Mu Ziyi and drank it in one gulp, then coughed and said, "How long has it been now? Has there been any unusual movements in the pugilistic world?" Mu Ziyi said, "It has been 10 days, but there have been no unusual movements." After the battle with the Blue Dragon Society, Chunyang Dao sect and Sabodi Monastery did not come out of it without losses. After returning to their sects, they did not take any action again. In fact, Chunyang Dao sect has already begun to seal their mountains, and they are not accepting visitors. Chu Xiu nodded. It was more or less what he had expected. As long as he survived this time, the Taoist and Buddhist sects should not continue to take action. However, at this time, although Chu Xiu had woken up, his body was currently overdrawn. It had to be said that the blood demon transformation technique that Lu Jiang he developed was indeed powerful, but the consumption was also abnormally shocking. Only Chu Xiu, who had cultivated the undying demon pill, would dare to play such a game. If it were Lu Jiang he would probably be ready to reconstruct his body after using this technique. Therefore, now that Chu Xiu had woken up, he still had to use some time to recuperate from his injuries. Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to go into seclusion, Mu Ziyi left obediently. The others were still waiting for Chu Xiu's news. However, after Mu Ziyi left, Chu Xiu focused his mind on the blood soul bead, and asked Lu Jiang who was in a daze, "What kind of person is Dugu Weiwei? Don't say those words of praise. I'm asking you about his true character." The scene in the dream had left a very deep impression on Chu Xiu. In fact, Chu Xiu could even be sure that it was not a dream, but an image that he had seen through some mysterious connection. Because of this, Chu Xiu was puzzled. There were two Dugu Weiwei. One was in the Yellow Springs of the Blood Sea, while the other was imprisoned in a palace, suffering from the torture of the power of heaven and earth. Although they were the same person, the aura they emitted was completely different. Moreover, the bigger question was, who could imprison an existence like Dugu Weiwei? Among the people around Chu Xiu, the only one who had seen Dugu Weiwei was Lu Jiang. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only ask him questions. Lu Jiang was in a daze at the moment. When Chu Xiu spoke, he almost shivered in fear. Chu Xiu did not know if it was because Lu Jianghe had been cooped up in the blood soul bead for 500 years, but Lu Jianghe was very talkative at times, which annoyed Chu Xiu a lot. Therefore, Chu Xiu would sometimes use his mental strength to block the blood soul bead. During this time, Lu Jiang was in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking, but he would sneer, laugh wildly, or even laugh foolishly from time to time. Glaring at Chu Xiu, Lu Jiang said angrily, "Didn't you ask this question? Of course, the sect leader has the character of the sect leader, domineering, decisive, and unparalleled in wit. What else can he be?" Chu Xiu said, "That's not what I'm asking you about. I'm asking about his character when it comes to dealing with people, such as whether he's vicious or vicious, petty or magnanimous, bold or gloomy? Lu Jianghe thought for a while and said, "It's hard to say. How can the sect leader's character be so easy to guess? In the eyes of most of the saints' warriors, the sect leader is almost perfect. Whether or not the cult leader was truly vicious and vicious, no one could say for sure. After all, there were quite a number of people in the Kunlun demon sect who were saved by the cult leader. For example, Heartless Demon Lord. But outside Hehe, when it comes to destroying a family, the sect leader is your ancestor. Those who follow him will prosper, and those who oppose him will perish. That is not just for show. If you say one wrong thing, your whole family will be killed. It is not like the sect leader has never done something like that before. As for whether or not he is stingy, I think he is. Otherwise, I would not have been imprisoned here." Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghe and did not say anything. He did not seem to have realized what he had done wrong. Dugu Weiwei had not killed him, and that was already very generous. Lu Jianghe continued, "As for whether the sect leader is heroic or not, it depends on the person. For example, the sect leader admired sword sage Gu Qingqing very much. Even when Gu Qingqing died, she said it's a pity 3 times. It was the same when he faced Ning Xuanji's challenge. Although Ning Xuanji, the old Taoist, did have some skills, the real martial cult was not strong at that time. As long as the sect leader said the word, the Kunlun devil cult could easily destroy the real martial cult, which would affect Ning Xuanji's performance. However, the sect leader did not do that. He even ordered us not to cause trouble for the real martial cult. But sometimes cult master is also very narrow-minded. If someone came to find trouble with cult master while shouting the slogan of exterminating the evil and defending the Tao, cult master would cripple their martial arts and strip them naked before displaying them in front of the Kunlun devil sect's entrance. Glancing at Chu Xiu, Lu Jianghe said, "That's why there won't be an answer to this question of yours. At the sect leader's level, he naturally does whatever he wants. His personality is completely determined by his mood. However, compared to the sect leader, you still have an advantage. You're even more shameless than the sect leader. You don't have to say the last sentence. It's unnecessary." After saying that, Chu Xiu's mind left the blood soul orb. The Dugu Weiwei that Lu Jianghe saw was Dugu Weiwei. The Dugu Weiwei that he saw in his dream could also be Dugu Weiwei. He was afraid that he would not be able to get an answer for the time being. In the eyes of others, a person could have 1,000 different faces. Different people from different positions could see different personalities. Chu Xiu simply did not think about these messy things for now. Instead, he would first recover from his injuries before talking about anything else. With the indestructible magic pill, Chu Xiu's injuries recovered extremely quickly. In just half a month's time, he had almost recovered to his peak. After coming out of seclusion, a group of people were waiting for Chu Xiu. Although the battle with the Blue Dragon Society had passed, the aftermath was still there. As for how to deal with it, it still needed Chu Xiu to decide. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come out of seclusion, Wei Shuya was the first to smile and say, "Brat Chu Xiu, it's good that you're fine. You don't have to worry about this old man here. If you win this battle, then everything will be easy to talk about with Enmo. The internal problems of the Enmo clan were actually the easiest to solve. Previously, Situchi and the others all looked as if Chu Xiu would implicate the entire Enmo clan, and even dared to run over to Chu Xiu's side to complain. But now that Chu Xiu's achievements had come out, everyone immediately fell silent. Especially Shang Tianliang. This was a deterrent on the level of a nuclear bomb. This was because they couldn't figure out whether Shang Tianliang was a member of the Enmo clan, or an expert that Chu Xiu had invited from somewhere. If it was the former, then it would be fine. Everyone belonged to the Enmo clan, so they still had to follow the rules. However, if it was the latter, but the other party was only Chu Xiu's people, then it would be troublesome. Other than Wei Shuya, the others weren't too troublesome. Previously, some people coveted the Guanzhong torture room, but after Chu Xiu's achievements came out, those people were so scared that they didn't dare to do anything. Some people were even so scared that they directly fled. The Blue Dragon Society suffered some losses because of the attack on the Chunyang Dao sect, but it wasn't serious. On the contrary, the Blue Dragon Society's reputation greatly increased because of this. In the past, when the Blue Dragon Society was in Butiannon's hands, it actually only had some deterrent power to some small forces in the underworld. As for the real big sects, it wasn't too strong a deterrent. After all, the Blue Dragon Society didn't have too strong of a record, and Butiannon's reputation had even faintly suppressed the Blue Dragon Societies. Now that the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters and the 36 Big Dipper Division's killers came together and actually dared to attack the Chunyang Dao sect, that power was simply shocking. At the same time, it also let the entire underworld see the true strength of the Blue Dragon Society. This battle could be considered as making a name for themselves. As for the Jinwu Hall, Chu Xiu should find a chance to return to the Jinwu Hall. The trouble of the Jinwu Hall didn't lie with others, but with the Northern Yan Imperial Court and that Lord Xianglong. It was estimated that the other party had wanted to get rid of the Jinwu Hall for a long time. Taking advantage of the news of Chu Xiu's death, they could completely get rid of the Jinwu Hall. At this time, Shang Tianliang also came over and said with a serious expression, "Chu Xiu, it's time to fulfill your promise and bring some people out of the mall." Previously, Chu Xiu had said that as long as Shang Tianliang helped him block this time, Chu Xiu would once again go to the Green Capital space and bring some people out of the mall. During this time, Shang Tianliang had been watching this matter, but Chu Xiu hadn't woken up yet, so he couldn't urge him. Now that Chu Xiu had finally woken up, it was time to fulfill his promise. This kind of thing was a small matter for Chu Xiu, and it wasn't a big deal to only bring some people out of the mall. Therefore, Chu Xiu first went back to the mall with Shang Tianliang and brought out 1/10 of the mall's residents. These 10% of people were not Shang Tianliang's trusted aides, nor were they experts. On the contrary, they were the old, the weak, the women, the children, and the weak. People like them were the most dangerous in Emerald City, so the first people Shang Tianliang brought out were them. Chapter 898. Chu Xiu had arranged for the residents of Merchant City to stay in Northern Yan. Although there was the Blue Dragon Society in Eastern Qi, there were too many large forces in the Jianghu. It was not safe there. As for the Northern Yan, the only force that could cause trouble for Chu Xiu was the Great Light Temple. Of course, Chu Xiu also had his own dark thoughts. As long as he controlled the people in Merchant City, then Shang Tianliang could only be used by him. So of course, he had to arrange these people in places that he had the most confidence in. After everything was arranged, Chu Xiu began to bring Mei Qinglian and the others back to the Northern Yan Martial Suppression Hall. Returning to Northern Yan, when he arrived at Yanjing City, Chu Xiu found that the security in Yanjing City seemed to be stricter than before. Even the number of soldiers patrolling the streets had increased. Mei Qinglian said, "Before you revealed your identity, the Northern Yan Emperor was already having some problems. His old illness relapsed and he summoned countless famous doctors in the Jianghu. Phone booping from the Martial Suppression Hall, and a few alchemy masters from the Vermilion Bird Pavilion also went, but there was nothing they could do. His Majesty is probably reaching the end of his lifespan. You know, no one is not afraid of death, especially those in high positions. Therefore, it is normal for the situation to be tense." Chu Xiu was surprised. Is it that bad? Although the Northern Yan Kingdom is not as rich as the Eastern Qi Kingdom, they should have accumulated a lot. Are there no 9 revolution pills among them? Mei Qinglian only spat out 4 words. Too weak to be nourished. Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu immediately understood. It was not that the Northern Yan Kingdom did not have 9 revolution pills that could extend one's lifespan. In fact, there were quite a few of them. However, the problem was that Xianglong could not take them. Any pill that could extend one's lifespan was at least 6 revolution pills. To a cultivator, this was nothing. However, to an old, ordinary person like Xianglong, the medicinal power was too strong. He was unable to withstand it at all. After eating it, he would die even faster. In fact, sometimes things in this world were very fair. The difficulty of managing a country was definitely more difficult than managing a sect. Since he had chosen to be the emperor, he naturally had to give up on martial arts and give up on his own strength. In the past, when many countries were at war, the royal families of many small countries also practiced martial arts. This was because their countries were too small. It was only the size of a prefecture. How hard could it be to manage? But when it came to the size of a large country like Eastern Qi and Northern Yan, if the emperor of a country ignored the politics of the court and focused on martial arts instead, he would be a fatuous ruler. If he wanted to practice martial arts, that was fine. But he had to abdicate his position and go to the imperial consecration hall to practice. Then, he could replace him with someone who could focus on managing the state affairs. LV Fengxian said from the side, His Majesty's desire for victory is too strong, and his ambition is too great. If he is still in the prime of his life, it will not be a good thing for the three great countries. This time, when he returned to Northern Yan, Lu Fengxian also came back. Originally, Lu Fengxian was in charge of the Guanzhong torture room. But now that the crisis in Guanzhong torture room had been resolved, Lu Fengxian was unwilling to stay there. First, Lu Fengxian had nothing to do with Guanzhong torture room. Second, he was not good at handling complicated affairs. Even if Chu Xiu handed Guanzhong torture room to him, Lu Fengxian would still decline. Hearing that, Chu Xiu said indifferently, Today's heroes, the hegemony of the emperor, these are all built with human lives. In fact, even Xiang Long is a mediocre person. Unless the world is unified and the Jianghu is restrained, there will be chaos everywhere. With that, Chu Xiu's lips curled into an unreadable smile. He said, Let's go. Let's go see that emperor first. After cultivating the true fire, Chu Xiu's strength had improved greatly. In the third war between the righteous and the demonic, Chu Xiu had single-handedly fought against the combined forces of Sabodhi Monastery and Chunyang Dao sect. This power was already shocking enough. Now that Chu Xiu faced Xiang Long again, he no longer needed to be as careful and calculative as before. Xiang Long was worried that he would not be able to shake off Chu Xiu. This time, Chu Xiu had come to tell Xiang Long that his worry had come true. Outside the palace, Xiang Long's personal eunuch, Eunuch Han, was waiting to welcome Chu Xiu. Once they met, Eunuch Han's cold face squeezed out a smile. He said, Official Chu has fought against both Taoism and Buddhism. Your name has shaken the Jianghu. I congratulate Official Chu. Chu Xiu smiled faintly. It's not a good job to exchange one's head for one's reputation. If Eunuch Han is interested, I can bring you along next time. The smile on Eunuch Han's face froze. He said, Official Chu must be joking. A eunuch like me can't do such a big thing. His Majesty is still waiting for Official Chu inside. Official Chu, please come in. Chu Xiu nodded and led Mei Qinglian and the rest into the palace. It had been more than a year since he last saw Xiang Long. At this moment, Xiang Long's face was haggard and he looked much older than before. Most importantly, Chu Xiu could sense an aura of lethargy coming from Xiang Long's body. It was a strong aura of lethargy. Clearly, this emperor would not be able to hold on much longer. At this moment, there were other people in the palace. There was General Kuang Tu, Beigong Bailey of the Eastern Mountain Army of the 5 Northern Yan armies, General Ren Qianli of the Northern Guard Army, and Taoist Wu Yang. The way these people looked at Chu Xiu was different. Beigong Bailey was indifferent. At his level of strength and status, he would not easily make enemies with others. Previously, when he took over the martial suppression hall, although he had interacted with Chu Xiu, there was no enmity between them. However, Ren Qianli looked at Chu Xiu with a strong sense of fear and dread. The hatred of killing one's father was absolutely irreconcilable. It was almost the same for killing one's master. However, Ren Qianli could be said to be timid or slippery. When he first learned of Fang Jinwu's death, Ren Qianli's first choice was not to take revenge, but to hide far away. He was afraid that Chu Xiu would eliminate him. However, his worry was unnecessary. At that time, Chu Xiu could not be bothered with him. Moreover, Chu Xiu had not fallen out with Xiang Long yet. It was unwise to rashly touch a general of the imperial court. However, Ren Qianli's bad side was that when he heard of Chu Xiu's death, he actually thought that Chu Xiu was dead. Therefore, under his active bewitchment, or rather, under Xiang Long's incitement, Ren Qianli actually had the idea of annexing the martial suppression hall. Although he did not succeed in the end, he still successfully offended Chu Xiu. When he first heard that Chu Xiu was not dead, Ren Qianli was really shocked. If Xiang Long had not summoned Chu Xiu to the palace, Ren Qianli would not even have the courage to face Chu Xiu. As for Taoist Wu Yang, he was fearless and even heaved a sigh of relief. He was somewhat proud. When he first heard that Chu Xiu was dead, it was not that Taoist Wu Yang did not have the idea of taking over the martial suppression hall. However, he gave up in the end. Firstly, it was because Taoist Wu Yang's Yinshan sect was previously a vassal of the Kunlun devil cult. He knew what kind of morals that group of evil cultivators were. Although Chu Xiu was dead, Wei Shiya was still alive. Part of the reason why he did not take over the martial suppression hall was because he was wary of Wei Shiya. Another reason was that Taoist Wu Yang had seen clearly what kind of character Xianglong was. Before Chu Xiu became powerful, he had roped in Chu Xiu and established the martial suppression hall to suppress the Northern Yan martial arts community. After the martial suppression hall became powerful, he began to suppress the martial suppression hall. Although Xianglong seemed to trust him now and put him in an important position, once he, Taoist Wu Yang, grew to the point where he was on the same level as Chu Xiu, he would be the one being suppressed. Therefore, not only did Taoist Wu Yang not take action against the martial suppression hall, but he also secretly passed the news to them. Now, it seemed that he had taken the right step. Chu Xiu, I have heard about your matter. When I first heard that you had met with an accident, I was very distressed, Xianglong said with a smile on his face. Chu Xiu casually bowed to Xianglong and said, "So your majesty is prepared to hand over the martial suppression hall that I built with my own hands to someone else?" Xianglong's face suddenly stiffened. At the same time, his eyes also showed a touch of anger. Knowing that Chu Xiu was not dead and had even withstood the joint siege of Taoism and Buddhism, Xianglong was originally prepared to give Chu Xiu a way out. After all, it was not good for either side to shed all pretense of cordiality. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu did not know how to appreciate favors, and said all of this in front of everyone? Xianglong suppressed the anger in his heart and said with a smile on his face, "It is just a misunderstanding. The martial suppression hall is now an important department of the Northern Yan to supervise and control the Northern Yan martial arts community. When you are not here, I am also worried that the martial suppression hall will be a group of dragons without a leader, so I thought of this method. Now that you, Chu Xiu, are back, the position of the martial suppression hall commandant is still yours. No one can take it away from you. I can even guarantee that as long as I am here, no one will dare to touch your position as the martial suppression hall commandant." Chu Xiu sneered in his heart, but on the surface he bowed to Xianglong and said, "In that case, thank you, Your Majesty." At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "By the way, Your Majesty, I have one more thing to report." "What is it?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. "I have reported that the Northern Guard Army's General Ren Qianli has colluded with foreign countries, colluded with Eastern Qi, and betrayed the intelligence and interests of the Northern Yan. He should be executed for his crime." Upon hearing this, Ren Qianli suddenly trembled and quickly stood up and shouted, "Chu Xiu, you are slandering me. When did I collude with Eastern Qi and betray the Northern Yan? In front of Your Majesty, everything must be based on evidence." Although he knew that Chu Xiu would not let him off so easily, he did not expect Chu Xiu to distort the truth in front of everyone and smear his name. Ren Qianli was originally a Northern Yan man. After he finished his apprenticeship, he also served in the Northern Yan imperial court until now. For so many years his foundation and interests were all in the Northern Yan. He would only collude with Eastern Qi if he had nothing better to do. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Evidence? I am the evidence. With my reputation in the pugilistic world, do you think that I, Chu Xiu, would frame you? Your Majesty, I have found a traitor for you. Do you believe me or him?" Chapter 899. Many people had seen false accusations before, but Chu Xiu's blatant attempt to frame someone was a challenge to everyone's intelligence. The smile on Xianglong's face gradually disappeared. "Chu Xiu, are you joking with me? Ren Qianli has been with me for so many years. I don't believe that he would betray the Northern Yan." Given Xianglong's suspicious nature, how could he treat Ren Qianli as his trusted aide if he wasn't confident? He couldn't find any reason for Ren Qianli to betray him, let alone colluding with Eastern Qi. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Does that mean that Your Majesty doesn't believe in my trustworthiness?" The mouths of everyone present, including Mei Qinglian and the others, twitched. Chu Xiu didn't seem to have any trustworthiness in the pugilistic world. At least, his trustworthiness wasn't worth much. Xianglong snorted. Chu Xiu, don't cause trouble here. I know about the grudge between you and Ren Qianli, but I've already explained that it's all a misunderstanding. What more do you want? Chu Xiu shook his head. Honest words are unpleasant to the ear. It seems that your majesty still doesn't believe me. Forget it. It's the duty of an official to share the emperor's burdens. Since that's the case, I'll settle it myself. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's body burned with inner fire. He took a step forward, causing the entire hall to shake. He was actually attacking Ren Qianli. No one present had expected that Chu Xiu would actually dare to make a move in front of Xianglong. He was simply audacious to the extreme. How dare you? Beigong Bailey's face darkened. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Chu Xiu. His fist landed like a spear, and the surrounding space even distorted slightly, producing a shocking explosion. Beigong Bailey had no grudge against Chu Xiu, but this was the Northern Yan Imperial Palace. Chu Xiu had made a move right in front of him, so he had no choice but to intervene. Chu Xiu also punched out, displaying the mountain and sea fist scripture of the Black Tortoise True technique. Their fists met, and in an instant, an extreme power erupted. From the first exchange, Chu Xiu knew that Beigong Bailey, the top expert of the Northern Yan military, deserved his reputation. The other party was a martial artist who came from the military. His body had been tempered to an extremely shocking degree. Even though Chu Xiu had cultivated his true fire-tempering body, he still could not gain an advantage over the other party in terms of physical strength. But right now, Chu Xiu had no intention of fighting Beigong Bailey to the death. He was only attacking to kill. Just as Chu Xiu's various Black Tortoise True techniques erupted from his hands, a dozen blood shadows flew out from behind him. This scene immediately gave Eunuch Han a fright. Protect the Emperor! Eunuch Han shouted in a shrill voice. The sinister energy around his body drifted away as he stood in front of Xianglong. Chu Xiu was not crazy enough to want to kill Xianglong in the Northern Yan Imperial Palace. The blood shadows only went straight for Xianglong. Taoist Wuang only stopped one blood shadow symbolically, but more blood shadows charged straight for Ren Qianli. Ren Qianli's face instantly turned deathly pale when he felt the immense power of the blood shadows behind him, and the piercing power of the evil blood. Originally, he thought that Chu Xiu would not dare to act presumptuously in the Imperial Palace. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would be so audacious? He actually dared to attack him in the Imperial Palace, right in front of Xianglong. In this life-or-death crisis, Ren Qianli formed a seal with his hands. In an instant, an extremely cold blood energy exploded from his body. This was not a cultivation method passed down in Fang Jinwu's lineage. Instead, it was a secret art of the devil path that he had obtained by chance. It did not require him to burn his blood essence, but to purify the cold energy in his own qi and blood. At the same time, Ren Qianli's seal emitted a wisp of Buddhist light. That was his lineage's Gang energy secret technique, that was close to Buddhism. The cold blood energy combined with the scorching Buddhist light. When the seal landed, Ren Qianli almost exploded with all his strength. As long as he could block this attack, and hold on until the experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Consecration Hall arrived, he would be saved. Ren Qianli could not help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw the blood shadows in front of him explode one after another. However, the next moment, this sigh of relief turned into a spurt of blood. He did not know when, but a blood shadow holding a sword had already appeared behind him. The demonic blood sword pierced through his entire body, and a large amount of blood spurted out of Ren Qianli's mouth. With a soft sound, the blood shadow drifted away, and Ren Qianli's body also fell to the ground. At this moment, a powerful aura came from the palace. There were real pellet state and real fire spirit refinement state. Impressively, the experts from the Imperial Consecration Hall had arrived, but they were a little too late. Ren Qianli was dead, and Beigong Bailey retreated with a black face. With him intercepting Ren Qianli, Chu Xiu still managed to kill him. This was undoubtedly a very embarrassing thing. However, Beigong Bailey was also helpless. He was a martial artist from the military, and his martial arts were bold and powerful. If it was in the outside world, he would not be afraid of Chu Xiu. However, in such a narrow place he still had to be wary of Xianglong, so he could not exert his full strength. Moreover, in the face of all kinds of strange martial arts from Chu Xiu, he was also very helpless. Looking at Ren Qianli's corpse below, Xianglong was so angry that his whole body trembled. He pushed Eunuch Han, who was in front of him, away, pointed at Chu Xiu, and said angrily, "Chu Xiu, how dare you kill someone in front of me? How dare you?" Chu Xiu cupped his fists and bowed. "Please forgive me, Your Majesty. I know that Your Majesty cannot bear to take action because of your old friendship, so I will do it on Your Majesty's behalf. Only by killing such a shameless person who colludes with a foreign country will it be satisfying. I hope Your Majesty will not blame me for my rudeness. Now that the world is in turmoil, I have just experienced a disaster, and the Great Light Temple has not suffered any losses at all. At this critical moment, a despicable person like Ren Qianli, who dares to collude with a foreign enemy, must be killed as quickly as possible." Eunuch Han looked worriedly at Xianglong, who was trembling in anger. At this moment, Xianglong was looking at Chu Xiu with undisguised murderous intent. However, after a while, the murderous intent around Xianglong dissipated. He waved his hand in extreme exhaustion. "All right, you may leave." Hearing this, the auras belonging to the Imperial Hall of Consecrators left. Chu Xiu bowed to Xianglong and said, "Since this is the case, I will take my leave." With that, Chu Xiu led his men and left calmly. After Chu Xiu and the others, including Taoist Wu Yang and Beigong Bailey, had left, Xianglong grabbed the teacup beside him and smashed it on the ground. Like an angry lion he roared, "Bastard! How dare he threaten me? How dare he threaten me?" Who could not understand the meaning behind Chu Xiu's words. In any case, Xianglong understood it. It was not an explanation, but a threat and a warning. The Jianghu was turbulent. With the power that Chu Xiu had displayed, the Blue Dragon Society alone was enough to pose a threat to the Northern Yan. He said that he had gone through this calamity and succeeded against both Taoism and Buddhism. What he meant was that even if the Northern Yan attacked him with all their might, he might not lose. Similarly, when Chu Xiu mentioned the Great Light Temple, it was also a threat. The Zhenwu Hall was at least a part of the Northern Yan, while the Great Light Temple was purely a place outside of civilization. Even if the monks were to discipline them on the surface, they would not listen to the Northern Yan court. If Xianglong was younger and more aggressive, he might have fallen out with Chu Xiu on the spot. However, it was a pity that he was too old, and his confidence was lacking. The Zhenwu Hall had already become a part of the Northern Yan order. If he openly fell out with them, he would not be able to take down Chu Xiu. The Northern Yan Jianghu would definitely be in chaos, and it would also affect the court. Especially now that he did not know how long Xianglong could live. There was not much time left for him. The Northern Yan could not be in chaos. At this time, outside the Northern Yan Palace, Mei Qinglian stared at Chu Xiu without blinking. Chu Xiu had goosebumps. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Mei Qinglian said. "I found that you have reconstructed your body, and you are much bolder than before. You killed someone in front of Xianglong. Aren't you afraid that Xianglong will really fall out with you?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I have always been this bold. The more powerful one is, the more bolder he is. This is normal. Weak but bold, that is called not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. Strong but timid, that is called indecisiveness, and you will not be able to achieve great things. So what if it is the Northern Yan court? Xianglong has scruples, but I do not. If he really dared to fall out with me, he would have done so when the news of my death came. Wouldn't it be easy to take over the Zhenwu Hall when I was not here? He did not do so, which means that he has concerns. He cannot bear the consequences of the Northern Yan chaos. Moreover, even if Xianglong really fell out with me, it is not like we can't fight our way out. As long as there is no mysterious heaven and earth realm, who can stop me?" Chu Xiu was not being arrogant. He had the strength and confidence to do so. In the spiritual refinement realm, except for the few who stood at the peak, Chu Xiu was confident that he could fight the rest of the people in Chu Xiu's spiritual refinement realm. Even if he could not win, he could escape. Therefore, as long as there was no spiritual refinement realm, Chu Xiu was not worried. As for Ren Qianli, he had to be killed. Even if he was not in the palace today, Chu Xiu would find a chance to kill him. It was not only revenge, but also a warning. At any time, force was always the most powerful means of warning. For example, Taoist Wu Yang was like this. After being frightened by Chu Xiu, he did not dare to touch the Jinwu Hall again, even if he had Xiang Long's instructions. After this incident, if Xiang Long wanted to touch the Jinwu Hall again, he would have to consider the consequences. After this incident, the court directly announced that Ren Qianli had died in the hands of an assassin of Eastern Qi, and made Eastern Qi the scapegoat. Anyway, this was not the first time something like this had happened. Chu Xiu did not care about what the Northern Yan court said. There were still a lot of things in the Jinwu Hall that he needed to deal with. While Chu Xiu was away, the Jinwu Hall operated as usual, but some important things were temporarily put on hold. Now that Chu Xiu was back, these things naturally needed his decision. Moreover, Chu Xiu also needed to find a place to make arrangements for those people in the mall. Chapter 900. Chu Xiu stayed in the Jinwu Hall for nearly a month. During this month, he had almost no time to cultivate. It was not until a month later that he had solved all the problems in all aspects and handled them properly. After Chu Xiu had dealt with these matters, he began to think about his own matters, the most important of which was his weapon. It had to be said that Chu Xiu was a little excited when he first obtained the Heavenly War Case. After all, in terms of subtlety, the Heavenly War Case could be said to be far superior to the Heavenly Demon Dance. As a result, when he used it, Chu Xiu found that the Heavenly War Case really had a fatal flaw, as Master Mo Yezi had said, which was its degree of firmness. A weapon, even if it had countless uses and all kinds of unexpected changes, was still a weapon. The degree of firmness was the most important. In particular, during the last battle with Ling Yunzi, Chu Xiu had a more direct understanding of this point. Ling Yunzi's barehanded attack had directly smashed the Heavenly War Case. Fortunately, Master Mo Yezi's skills guaranteed that none of the mechanical parts were damaged and could be reused later. However, this situation was extremely dangerous. In a life-and-death battle, the slightest mistake could lead to a great loss. A little carelessness could lead to death. Therefore, after solving the matter with the Northern Yan, Chu Xiu was also ready to solve the problem with the Heavenly War Case. He could also solve a simple hatred, a very small one. Master Mo Yezi had said that if the Heavenly War Case wanted to reach its peak, it must be forged with the meteoric iron as the main material. As for the meteoric iron, so far, Master Mo Yezi knew that only the divine sword Flowing Light Evil Moon of the Hidden Sword Villa was made with this material. Therefore, Chu Xiu had long prepared to go to the Hidden Sword Villa. However, there were too many things that happened later, so Chu Xiu did not have the time to care about the Hidden Sword Villa. Speaking of which, the Hidden Sword Villa could only blame itself for being unlucky. In fact, the Hidden Sword Villa had never been on good terms with Chu Xiu. The villa master, Cheng Tingshan, had already clashed with Chu Xiu several times. However, these were just small matters. Even when Cheng Tingshan had led Kuang Xieyue to kill Chu Xiu had not taken it to heart. Sometimes Chu Xiu could be considered very magnanimous. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Chu Xiu had too many enemies. He remembered the big grudges and could only put aside the small ones. It could be said that if not for the Flowing Light Evil Moon, Chu Xiu would not have bothered to find trouble with the Hidden Sword Villa. But now, there was another reason to attack the Hidden Sword Villa. Calling Mei Qinglian and the rest, Chu Xiu told Mei Qinglian and the rest about the matter. Mei Qinglian thought for a while and said, "Hidden Sword Villa? That's easy. This generation of the Hidden Sword Villa did not have any strong people, and Cheng Tingshan was just a mediocre person. The only thing they needed to guard against was the sword formations of the Hidden Sword Villa. Over the years, the Hidden Sword Villa had collected countless famous swords. The other sword sects were famous for their swordsmen, but only the Hidden Sword Villa was famous for its swords. The sword formations formed by these famous swords were indeed difficult to deal with. If you want to attack the Hidden Sword Villa, you must attack before the sword formations are activated. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the sword formations were alarmed. How about this? I will pick a few new faces from the subduing martial hall, and let them disguise themselves as odd job workers or outer sect disciples, and find a way to enter the hidden sword villa. Then, we will work together and find a way to attack the hidden sword villa before the formation is activated. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. Just send an invitation to the hidden sword villa, and tell them to hand over the flowing light evil moon, and I will let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, if they don't hand it over, I will come and get it myself." Mei Qinglian was stunned. Peng Hu, who was at the side, also scratched his head. He suddenly felt that Chu Xiu was more like a bandit than he was. Is it that simple and crude? Mei Qinglian still could not accept such a method. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "It's that simple and crude. It's a problem that can be solved with absolute strength. Why do you have to make it so complicated? The hidden sword villa is the weakest among the 5 major sword sections. Even if City Lord Shang does not make a move, we can solve it ourselves. If Cheng Tingshan gives it to us, it means that he knows his place, and we can save ourselves some effort." Mei Qinglian did not ask what would happen if Cheng Tingshan did not know his place. With Chu Xiu's way of doing things, it was obvious. However, this method still made Mei Qinglian a little uncomfortable. After all, there were not many people in the pugilistic world like Chu Xiu who would openly threaten others for things. But thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make sense. Therefore, Mei Qinglian followed Chu Xiu's instructions, and sent someone to send an invitation to the hidden sword villa. It was Chu Xiu's exact words, without changing a single word. His attitude could be said to be extremely arrogant. In Eastern Qi's hidden sword villa, when Cheng Tingshan saw Chu Xiu's invitation, his first reaction was anger, and then fear. Back in the illusory realm 6, he had watched as Chu Xiu's body was smashed to pieces. At that time, Cheng Tingshan had secretly rejoiced. As a result, less than a year later, there was news that Chu Xiu had been resurrected, and his strength was even stronger than before. At that time, Cheng Tingshan was also terrified, thinking that Chu Xiu was coming to find trouble with him. As a result, who would have thought that Chu Xiu went on a killing spree in the pugilistic world, and never came to find him at all? This also made Cheng Tingshan breathe a sigh of relief. But now seeing this post, Cheng Tingshan's mood was like riding a roller coaster, ups and downs. With this cycle, Cheng Tingshan felt that he would be scared to death by Chu Xiu even if he was not killed by him. With a sigh, Cheng Tingshan called a servant and said, "Go to the guarding sword pavilion and gather the elders for a discussion." To be precise, Cheng Tingshan was not the only martial Dao Grand Master of the real pellet state in the hidden sword villa. There were also other older generation martial artists. However, these older generation martial artists had long been unable to make a move. It was not that they didn't want to, but they couldn't. The hidden sword villa collected the world's famous swords, and there were many divine weapons among them. However, because the divine weapon had a sword spirit, and the sword spirit also had a mind, so if the sword spirit was damaged accidentally, it would inevitably cause the famous sword's grade to drop. Therefore, in every generation of the hidden sword villa, someone would choose to enter the guarding sword pavilion and nurture the divine sword with their own blood and sweat. No matter what realm they reached, they were not allowed to go out and serve the sword for life. People in the pugilistic world said that the sword of the hidden sword villa was more important than the person. This sentence was not just a mockery but a fact. Of course, the divine weapon had a spirit. The hidden sword villa had done this for thousands of years, and it was not without rewards. At least all the divine weapons collected by the hidden sword villa could be used by the hidden sword villa to help them set up the sword array. This was also a return of favor. Although Cheng Tingshan was the villa master, he still had to discuss this kind of thing with a group of elders. Moreover, these elders were the real trump card of the hidden sword villa. Those famous swords and divine weapons were nurtured by them with their qi and blood, so they had the highest compatibility with them. Once the hidden sword villa was in a crisis and needed to use this trump card, it still depended on these elders. In a living room of the guarding sword pavilion, Cheng Tingshan sat on the lower seat, and the 6 elders of the hidden sword villa sat on the side. Their faces were generally pale, and their bodies were thin. It was obviously caused by not seeing the sun for many years and the loss of qi and blood. In fact, there were hundreds of martial artists who entered the guarding sword pavilion to serve the sword in each generation, but after a few decades, there were only 6 people left. Although the martial artists who entered the guarding sword pavilion to choose the sword were not short of various cultivation resources, and they were even given priority, the strength of the people who entered the guarding sword pavilion was originally uneven, and they were in a state of loss of qi and blood all year round. Their lifespan was extremely short, and those who didn't reach the real pellet state all died. Only the 6 of them persisted until now. Cheng Tingshan took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Elders, now our hidden sword villa is in danger. You have all seen Chu Xiu's post. This flowing light evil moon, should we give it or not?" "Of course not." The 6 elders spoke almost at the same time. One of them gritted his teeth and said, "Our hidden sword villa respects the sword, and we serve the sword for life. The sword is our life. If someone wants your life, will you give it to him?" Cheng Tingshan smiled bitterly. "But if we don't give it, I'm afraid Chu Xiu will really take our lives. Elders, you have been in the guarding sword pavilion for a long time, so you may not know the news of the outside world. Chu Xiu's fierce name has already spread throughout the martial world. Previously, Sabodhi Zen Monastery and Chunyang Dao sect teamed up to deal with him, but he was still able to withstand it. The most terrifying thing is that he has a heaven and earth mysterious state powerhouse on his side. The opponent's strength is probably enough to destroy our hidden sword villa." Although the 6 elders of the hidden sword villa stayed in the guarding sword pavilion all year round, so their thoughts and actions were a bit extreme, they were not idiots. If it was only the true fire spirit refinement state, then their hidden sword villa could still block it with their own sword array, but if it was the heaven and earth mysterious state, no matter how strong the sword was, it was no match for these martial world masters. After a long silence, an elder said, "Don't Sword King City, Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, and Forgetful Sword Hut all want our hidden sword villa's sword array? We can't give them the sword, so they can find it themselves. But we can give them the sword array, so they can help us once. Although the 5 major sword sects are not on the same side, they will not ignore it. I heard that the Yunu Palace was destroyed by Chu Xiu. If our hidden sword villa is also destroyed by Chu Xiu, it will not be good for the 5 major sword sects' face. Sword King City's Human King sword can match the heaven and earth mysterious state. Who knows what trump cards are hidden in the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb? Who knows if that old monster from the Forgetful Sword Hut is dead or not?" Although the 3 sects don't have the heaven and earth mysterious state on the surface, they are still qualified to fight him. When Cheng Tingshan heard this, he immediately said, "Since the elders are also doing this, then I will make the preparations." In fact, this was also a countermeasure in Cheng Tingshan's mind, but he did not say it out loud. Because in the beginning, he even wanted to admit defeat and hand over the flowing light evil moon. But that would inevitably cause the hidden sword villa disciples to be dissatisfied, thinking that he, the villa master, was not a hot-blooded person. Now that he had pulled the elders over, everyone made a decision together. Whether it was good or bad, at least he was not the only one responsible. Chapter 901. Hidden Sword Villa did not respond after receiving Chu Xiu's invitation. Chu Xiu could almost guess Hidden Sword Villa's attitude. Chu Xiu was not surprised by Hidden Sword Villa's attitude. Other people's attitude towards swords was just a weapon, but Hidden Sword Villa's attitude towards swords was extremely stubborn. They even thought that the swords in their hands were more important than people. For so many years, it had always been Hidden Sword Villa who used all means to collect the world's famous swords. When did Hidden Sword Villa take out a sword? Even if there was, it had to be Hidden Sword Villa, who took the initiative to give it to their vassal force to rope in. For example, the Longevity Sword sect that had been destroyed by Chu Xiu in the past. Although the Longevity Sword sect was one of the new 7 sects, it was actually a vassal of the Hidden Sword Villa. Cheng Tingshan had given him a divine weapon, which was equivalent to him falling into his hands. Now that Chu Xiu was using a threatening attitude to ask for it, if Hidden Sword Villa gave it, would moon-worshipping sect give it to them in the future? This could not be opened. If it was opened, Hidden Sword Villa would never have a day of peace. The corner of Chu Xiu's mouth revealed a smile. Hidden Sword Villa was not completely cowardly. In that case, he wanted to see how strong they could be. As he spoke, Chu Xiu immediately found Mei Qinglian and the others. He prepared to bring a few elites from Martial Hall to Hidden Sword Villa. At the same time, Chu Xiu also brought Shang Tianliang along. Mei Qinglian was surprised. Didn't you say that you could deal with Hidden Sword Villa by yourself? Why are you bringing Mr. Shang? Chu Xiu said lightly, I am not afraid of Hidden Sword Villa, but I am afraid that someone will meddle in other people's business. Meddle in other people's business? With your current power, who would dare to meddle in other people's business? We have to guard against the other 3 major sword sections. Don't forget the righteous and demonic battle on Floating Jade Mountain. Compared to the Taoist and Buddhist lineages that have conflicts with each other, the relationship between the 5 major sword sects is much closer. It's better to be prepared. Just as Chu Xiu was about to take action, the 3 major forces had already received the news from the Hidden Sword Villa. Inside Sword King City, Shen Tianwang, Dugu Li, and Meng Yanghe were all there. Heavenly King Shen laughed coldly. Hidden Sword Mountain Villa is afraid now? Last time I wanted to borrow their evil annihilation sword to take a look. That old brat Cheng Tingshan was so stingy that he let me go as if I was a thief. Now that something has happened, he's asking my Sword King City for help. Meng Yanghe said in a deep voice. Then our Sword King City doesn't care about this matter? The last time I fought with Yi Xiaonan, the human king's sword suffered a lot of damage. If I use it again, I'm afraid that irreparable damage will appear. Dugu Li said from the side. Even if we don't use the human king's sword, our Sword King City has to take care of this matter. With the reputation of the 5 major sword sects here, no matter what Hidden Sword Villa does, that's up to us. We can't let Chu Xiu destroy the Yunu Palace and then destroy Hidden Sword Villa. Otherwise, what will the people of the pugilistic world think of our 5 major sword sects? Previously, Chu Xiu had killed Lin Fengya and almost destroyed the Yunu Palace, but the other 4 sects did not say anything. The reason was simple. The Yunu Palace had courted death themselves. After all, the 5 major sword sects were not one sect. It was a bit exaggerated to say that they were united, but they were still an alliance. If Chu Xiu had destroyed the Yunu Palace because of benefits, the other 4 sects would definitely intervene. However, the Yunu Palace had schemed against Chu Xiu's best friend and sworn brother. They deserved to be destroyed. They couldn't even find an excuse to intervene. Moreover, the women of the Yunu Palace were not very likable. Even within the 5 major sword sects, not many people liked them. This time, Chu Xiu had publicly threatened to demand the Hidden Sword Villa's divine weapon. They now had a reason to act. Most importantly, the Hidden Sword Villa was very sensible. They actually took the initiative to send the Hidden Sword Villa's sword formation blueprint to them. That's right, this time, the Hidden Sword Villa did not mention anything like helping them block this time, and they would give them the sword formation again. Instead, they sent the sword formation illustration along with the request for reinforcements. Their attitude was extremely humble, almost as if they were at their wits' end, and hoped that the few of them would help them. This attitude made the others feel rather comfortable. Moreover, the Hidden Sword Villa's sword formation was indeed something that the other sword sects coveted. The Hidden Sword Villa's sword formation was different from other formations. It was set up with swords and controlled by people. Even if you didn't know the slightest bit about formations, as long as you were a swordsman, you could control the sword formation. The Hidden Sword Villa had spent thousands of years researching the sword formation. It could be said to be one of the Hidden Sword Villa's secret techniques. Moreover, the other sword sects could also use it. This was also extremely tempting. Heavenly King Shen said in a low voice, "It's okay to attack. The key is how to control the speed. You've seen Chu Xiu's power. Even if we don't count the hidden devil clan behind him, his power is extremely shocking. If we don't control it well and lose ourselves for the Hidden Sword Villa, then it's not worth it." At that moment, Feng Qishao poked his head in and said, "Sect Master, why don't I go?" Seeing Feng Qishao, Dugu Li's face immediately darkened. "Why aren't you cultivating in the sword tower? Why are you here? Get lost and cultivate." Now, Dugu Li was angry at the sight of Feng Qishao. Although Fang Qixiao's sword Dao talent was indeed shocking, and there had never been such a talented person in Sword King City in the past thousands of years. However, Du Guli could not tolerate Fang Qixiao's personality, especially to an old-fashioned and inflexible warrior like Du Guli. Compared to Du Guli, Heavenly King Shen was much more tolerant of Fang Qixiao. Waving his hand, Heavenly King Shen said, "Come here and tell me, what ride do you have to go? Just because you're good friends with Chu Xiao? If what you say makes sense, then I'll let you go. If not, then go back to the sword tower and cultivate. Don't come out if you have nothing to do." Fang Qixiao walked in and said solemnly, "Sect Master, it's true that I'm good friends with Chu Xiao, but when have I ever harmed Sword King City's interests just because Chu Xiao is my good friend? I'm not bragging, but Chu Xiao and I have gone through many dangers together. We've been through life and death together. I even saved him before. If I go, at least you won't have to worry about Sword King City getting involved. If I go, Chu Xiao will have to give me face no matter what. When the time comes, I'll be able to handle things as I please. My identity will not bring shame to Sword King City. Isn't that great?" Du Guli looked at Fang Qixiao suspiciously. He seriously suspected that Fang Qixiao just wanted to use this opportunity to go out and have fun. Heavenly King Shen thought for a moment and said, "All right, you'll go this time." Before Fang Qixiao could get excited, Heavenly King Shen said, "But I'm afraid you'll cause trouble and bring shame to Sword King City. Xingjian Hall's Bai Qian is a steady man. Let him go with you. Once the matter is settled, return to Sword King City immediately." Upon hearing Heavenly King Shen's words, Fang Qixiao's face immediately fell. At the same time, inside the Heartless Sword Mound in the 100,000 Mountains, there was a huge deep valley that was shrouded in fog all day long. One could not see the sun, but the faint sound of swords could be heard, even passing through the thick fog and resounding throughout the world. At the moment, in the deepest part of the deep valley, there were many long swords stabbed into the ground. Some were complete, while others were incomplete. However, next to these long swords stood a grave. This was the center of the Heartless Sword Mound, the famous place where swords were buried. At the moment, in the fog, there were several figures sitting there. Their bodies were thin and stiff, like dried corpses. Yanji of the Heartless Sword Mound stood to one side and told them everything that had happened in the hidden Sword Mountain Villa. However, there was only silence in the Sword Mound, as if he was really reporting everything to the dead. After a while, an old figure stood up and coughed. "Forget it, I'll make the trip. Brothers, it's not convenient for you to move, so don't trouble yourself." The old figure who stood up was the nameless old man, who had fought in the battle of the Righteous Path and Demonic Path on Floating Jade Mountain. He was responsible for guarding the Sword Mound. At this moment, a faint voice came from the Sword Mound. "If there's a heaven and earth elemental enlightenment on the other side, you won't be able to handle it. Bring Fuyu with you to be safe." As soon as the voice finished, a beam of light shone from the Sword Mound. It looked like a small sword, but it disappeared into the nameless old man's body in an instant. The nameless old man nodded, bent his back, and slowly walked out of the Sword Mound. Within the Forgetful Sword Hut, Shen Baochen received the news and frowned. He sighed. These are troubled times. As one of the 5 great sword sects, he could not just watch as something happened to the hidden Sword Mountain Villa. Furthermore, he also thought that Chu Xiao had been too high profile recently. The Forgetful Sword Hut had no intention of participating in these messy matters, but they could not ignore it. Therefore, Shen Baochen had to personally make a trip. However, before he left, Shen Baochen hesitated for a moment. He turned around and returned to his room. He carefully took out a scroll and placed it in the secret space box. In the past, the Heaven and Earth Elemental Enlightenment Warrior by Chu Xiao's side, who had withstood dozens of blows from Rama and not died, had attracted the attention of countless people in the Jianghu. Although no one knew who he was, there was an existence in the Heaven and Earth Elemental Enlightenment realm. Then he had to be very careful in his actions. He did not want to fail to save the hidden Sword Mountain Villa, and instead lose his life. Just as everyone was moving, the most anxious was still the hidden Sword Mountain Villa. There was no news, and Cheng Tingshan did not know how the other 3 sects would react. Therefore, during this period of time, The Hidden Sword Mountain Villa had all their disciples maintain their vigilance. Even the sword formation was constantly in a state of being activated. At this moment, outside the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa, Chu Xiu looked at the vigilant look of the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Is the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa really prepared to fight to the end?" Lu Jiang, he chuckled from within the Blood Soul Pearl. "Kid, it seems that your deterrence is not enough. In the past, when the sect leader was here, he wanted to see the collection of the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa. That generation's Hidden Sword Mountain Villa master personally brought the divine weapon longsword to the Kunlun devil cult. However, the sect leader used a knife and did not care for those things." Chu Xiu said lightly, "If they did not take the initiative to send it, I would take the initiative to go and take it. The result would be the same. After this, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa will also be afraid of me. Of course, the premise is that after this, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa will still exist in the Jianghu." Chapter 902. Outside the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa, Chu Xiu brazenly appeared at the main entrance and said in a low voice, "Villa Master Chung, I would like to borrow your sword. I wonder if Villa Master Chung is willing to part with it?" In that instant, Chu Xiu's voice rang through the entire Hidden Sword Mountain Villa, causing all the martial artists in the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa to tremble. Cheng Tingshan let out a long sigh. At a time like this, as the Villa Master, he had no place to hide. He could only step forward. He ordered his men to prepare the array in the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa. Cheng Tingshan took a deep breath and pushed open the door. He said in a low voice, "Official Chu, please forgive me. The divine swords in the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa were all gathered by our ancestors with great effort. There has never been a rule of lending them to outsiders." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Oh, no lending? All right then, I'll just snatch it. There's no need to break the rules." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Cheng Tingshan almost spat out blood. If he didn't lend it, he would snatch it. This Chu Xiu actually said it so confidently. How shameless could he be? Cheng Tingshan wanted to say something but was interrupted by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said with a gloomy face, "Manor Lord Cheng, no matter how forgetful you are, you shouldn't have forgotten the grudges between us in the past, right? You may have forgotten, but I haven't. I, Chu Xiu, am not an unreasonable person. If you hand over the sword, I will write off all the grudges and karma between us. On the other hand, if you don't know how to appreciate my kindness, then don't blame me for being ruthless. That's why I'm curious. Where did you get the confidence to reject my conditions? Is it because my blade, Chu Xiu, is not strong enough? Or does your Hidden Sword Mountain Villa think that your head is tough enough? Cheng Tingshan, do you really think that I won't dare to kill your entire family?" A surging killing intent surged towards him. The powerful aura caused Cheng Tingshan's face to turn pale. For so many years, Chu Xiu had fought in the Jianghu. What kind of people had he not killed, and what kind of scenes had he not seen? Countless people had died directly or indirectly in his hands. Since he, Chu Xiu, had said that he would exterminate the entire clan, he would not leave anyone alive. This was not some mysterious thing like the words of law. Instead, it was the powerful killing intent that he had accumulated over the years. It was a horrifying killing intent. Official Chu, it's not good to have such a strong murderous aura. The Third Great War between the righteous and demonic factions just ended. Although you didn't lose, you didn't win either. In the past, when the moon-worshipping cult won the Second Great War, they weren't as arrogant as you are now. With a faint voice, Shen Baochen's figure descended from midair with an extraordinary aura. The one who came with Shen Baochen was the nameless elder from Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. He just stood there without saying a word. His expression was cold as if he was just watching the show. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He was right. The 5 major sword sects would not sit back and watch as the Hidden Sword Villa was destroyed. Arrogant? What's even more arrogant is yet to come. Do the two of you think that you can stop me with just the two of you? Shen Baochen took a step forward and said lightly, "Official Chu, you can try. The strong cultivator beside you is indeed in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. However, after the battle with Divine Monk Rama, I don't believe that he is not injured at all. The Forgetful Sword Hut and Wind Cloud Sword Tomb are not without a trump card. For a sword, official Chu has to pay such a huge price. Is it worth it? Shang Tianliang, who was standing beside Chu Xiu, snorted coldly. Even if he is injured, I can still fight. Divine Monk Rama's strength was indeed very strong. Although Shang Tianliang's head-on fighting style had successfully blocked Rama, he had also been injured quite badly. He did not have the invincible demon elixir. Thus, at the moment, even though Chu Xiu had recovered, Shang Tianliang still had some injuries that had not recovered. Just as both sides were ready to fight, a voice suddenly rang out. I say everyone, this is just a small matter. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it, right? Feng Qishao and Bai Qian from Sword King City walked over from behind. He even greeted everyone with a cheeky smile. Brother Chu, long time no see. No, to be precise, I just saw you a while ago, but you haven't seen me for a long time. Do you miss me? Oh, sect leader Shen of the Forgetful Sword Hut. You are really getting younger and younger. If you were just a little younger, I'm afraid you would steal all the limelight from us young heroes. This Wind Cloud Sword Tombs, a nameless elder, is still very healthy. It seems like living to 100 years is not a problem. Wait, elder, how old are you? Bai Qian, who was standing beside Feng Qishao, almost wanted to find a hole in the ground to hide in. This was too embarrassing. However, it had to be said that after Feng Qishao's jesting, the originally tense atmosphere eased a little. Chu Xiu nodded and said, It has indeed been a long time. I heard that you were grounded by Sword King City. You have now met the requirements of Sword King City, so you are allowed to come out of seclusion? Seventh young Master Feng smiled awkwardly. It was not easy for him to find such an excuse to go out, but he was still being watched. He reckoned that when he was truly free, he would either become the sect leader of Sword King City, or defeat Heavenly King Shen, and the other two. Shen Baochen frowned and said, The Sword King City sent you? Shen Baochen didn't mean to underestimate Feng Qishao. Among all the young disciples of the 5 major sword sects, no one could compare with Feng Qishao in terms of talent and potential. There were so many monstrous talents in this generation. Even compared with them, Feng Qishao wouldn't be too inferior. As the heir of Sword King City, Feng Qishao's position in the entire Sword King City might not be worse than Du Li and the others. In fact, he might even be higher. This was because Du Li represented a power that was close to decay, while 7th young Master Feng represented a bright and boundless future. But on this occasion, Sword King City only sent 2 real pellet state powerhouses. What's the use? Feng Qishao smiled and said, It doesn't matter how many people there are, as long as they are useful. Everyone, let's talk nicely. There's no need to fight and kill, right? With that said, Feng Qishao looked at Chu Xiu and said, Brother Chu, give me face and say a few words calmly, how about it? Chu Xiu said faintly, I have always been calm. Of course, the premise is that I can get what I want. Feng Qishao nodded and said, Brother Chu, tell me the truth. Do you want to settle the old grudges with Sword Hidden Villa today? Or do you just want the divine sword Flowing Light Evil Moon? Chu Xiu pointed to Cheng Tingshan and said, To put it bluntly, now I, Chu Xiu, have countless enemies all over the world. Cheng Tingshan is really nothing. I have made it very clear in the invitation I sent to Sword Hidden Villa before. As long as Sword Hidden Villa can hand over Flowing Light Evil Moon, I can settle all the old grudges, but obviously, Villa Master Cheng doesn't seem to want to do so. Feng Qishao looked at Cheng Tingshan, and Cheng Tingshan also gritted his teeth and said, Young Master Feng, it's not that my Sword Hidden Villa is stubborn to the end, but there are rules. Everything else can be given, but the divine swords collected by my Sword Hidden Villa cannot be given. Today, Chu Xiu came to ask for it with his strength. My Sword Hidden Villa admitted defeat and gave it. If the moon-worshipping cult also comes to ask for it in the future, will my Sword Hidden Villa give it? Once this mouth is opened, my Sword Hidden Villa will never have a peaceful day. The sword is the life of my Sword Hidden Villa. If the divine sword is taken away, the life of my Sword Hidden Villa will be gone. Do you think this kind of thing can be given casually? Feng Qishao nodded in understanding. He suddenly asked, Brother Chu, the Eternal Sword Sect's divine weapon, Wildfire, is with you, right? Chu Xiu was stunned. He thought for a moment before nodding. When he destroyed the Eternal Sword sect, he had indeed taken the divine weapon, wildfire. However, there were very few sword-wielding warriors around him, so it was temporarily useless. Hence, the divine weapon was kept by Chu Xiao. Feng Qishao chuckled and said, "That's easy. You have no use for the wildfire. Why don't you trade it for flowing light evil moon? One divine sword for another. It's very fair. Brother Chu, Villa Master Chung, what do you think?" As soon as Feng Qishao said this, everyone looked at him in astonishment. Chu Xiao's target was the flowing light evil moon. The other wildfire had been collecting dust in his secret space box for a long time, so it did not matter if he took it out. What surprised him the most was that Feng Qishao, an unreliable fellow, could come up with such an idea. Shen Baochen had more or less the same thought. If it was not necessary, they really did not want to fight with Chu Xiao now. It would be best if this matter could be resolved in such a way. Bai Qian was actually the most surprised. As long as the Sword King City's warriors had been in serious contact with Feng Qishao for a period of time, they would be worried about the future of Sword King City. Just the thought of Feng Qishao being in charge of Sword King City in the future made them feel vexed. However, after looking at Feng Qishao's methods, he was not stupid or naive. He just did not want to think about such things sometimes. As for the foolish things that 7th young Master Feng had done in the past, although it sounded a little speechless, he did not actually harm the Sword King City's interests. Bai Qian looked at Feng Qishao thoughtfully. It seemed that everyone had underestimated him in the past. Feng Qishao looked at Cheng Tingshan. Everyone was very satisfied with his idea. Only Cheng Tingshan was left. Cheng Tingshan gritted his teeth and was about to agree. Actually, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa was the one who was at a disadvantage. The Flowing Light Evil Moon was ranked 26th on the famous sword book, while the Wildfire was ranked 36th. There was a difference of 10 places. However, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa only wanted a reputation. As long as they did not directly give away the divine weapon, everything would be fine. However, at that moment, an old and agitated voice was suddenly heard. "No, absolutely not. Flowing Light Evil Moon, I has been nourishing it for decades. How can we hand it over to a demon like Chu Xiao?" An elder of the Hidden Sword Villa actually ran out and roared, his face filled with excitement. In an instant, Cheng Tingshan's expression changed abruptly, while the smile on Chu Xiao's face turned into a sinister smile. Feng Qishao sighed. There was nothing he could do if someone was courting death. Chapter 903. The atmosphere, which had already eased up, became tense again after the Hidden Sword Villa elder's words. Cheng Tingshan could accept Feng Qishao's idea. He was the manor lord, and not only did he have to consider the rules of the Hidden Sword Villa, he also had to consider the villa's future, and everything else in the Jianghu. But to the Hidden Sword Villa elder, the Hidden Sword Villa's sword, Demonic Moon, was his life. To these cultivators who had chosen to enter the Guardian Sword Pavilion in their prime, to serve the famed swords for their entire lives, they were respectable. But because of this, staying in the Guardian Sword Pavilion all year round, and using their own qi and blood to nourish their swords had caused their personalities to become extremely extreme, even unreasonable. The light demonic moon was the divine weapon that this elder had nurtured for his entire life. And now, not only was this divine weapon going to be handed over, it was going to be handed over to Chu Xiao. This was something that this elder absolutely could not tolerate. Chu Xiao looked at 7th young Master Feng, spread out his hands and said, "Brother Feng, you've seen it for yourself. It's not that I don't want to give you face, but that there's someone who insists on being stubborn." Cheng Tingshan looked at the Hidden Sword Villa elder and tried to persuade him. "Elder." But just as Cheng Tingshan finished speaking, he was interrupted by the Hidden Sword Villa elder. "Manor Lord, there's no need to say any more. I will definitely not hand over the Flowing Light Demonic Moon. If you want to hand it over, it's simple. Kill me and give the Flowing Light Demonic Moon to Chu Xiao in exchange for the Hidden Sword Manor's temporary survival. But, Manor Lord, don't forget that you're also a swordsman. A swordsman would rather break than bend. If you can defeat him, you'll defeat him. If you can't, you'll defeat him. Today, you've lowered your head, compromised, and knelt to protect the hidden sword villa and your life. But have you ever thought about whether you're worthy of the famed swords in the Guardian Sword Pavilion? Cheng Tingshan looked at the elder, sighed, and shouted, "Open the sword formation!" All along, Cheng Tingshan had not given the people of the Jianghu a good impression. He was too calculative and two-faced. Even people from the 5 major sword sects did not like to work with him. In the past, Cheng Tingshan had also been a swordsman in the Jianghu. But as time passed, the young swordsman had become a calculative hypocrite. Over the years, he had schemed and schemed for the sake of the hidden sword villa's little bit of profit. Even for his own power, he had once suppressed dissidents in the hidden sword villa. Even these elders were targets that he used. Over all these years, he had forgotten one thing. A swordsman would rather break than bend. Over all these years, he had forgotten that a swordsman would rather break than bend. Now that the elder had spoken, he couldn't really kill him and give the flowing light evil moon to Chu Xiu. If he did that, he would destroy the hearts of the people of the hidden sword manor. Martial uncle, as you can see, I've tried my best. This situation is not something my Sword King city can meddle in. I thought the hidden sword villa was just a bunch of mediocre people. I originally thought that the hidden sword villa was just a bunch of mediocre people. I didn't expect such a person to appear. I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse for the hidden sword villa. In all fairness, the 7th young master Feng admired the elder of the hidden sword villa. At least, he was right about one thing. A swordsman would rather break than bend. But the problem was he would rather break than bend. He had provoked a great enemy that could destroy the hidden sword villa. In the Jianghu, there were many things that were neither right nor wrong. Chu Xiu had a grudge against Cheng Tingshan. Moreover, he needed the demonic moon. It was normal for him to cause trouble for the hidden sword villa. As the manor lord, Cheng Tingshan had to compromise in order to protect the hidden sword villa's best interests. He had done nothing wrong. As for the elder of the hidden sword villa, he stayed in the guarding sword pavilion for half of his life and strictly adhered to his beliefs. No one was wrong, but when they met, they would set off an unprovoked massacre. Bai Qian shook his head and said, "7th young master, you have done enough. In this matter, my Sword King city has contributed, and we will no longer intervene." Compared with the hidden sword villa, Bai Qian was more gratified to see the growth of Feng Qixiao. He was already very satisfied that Feng Qixiao could do this. Besides, in this situation, it was useless for them to intervene. Chu Xiu was Feng Qixiao's good friend. He couldn't force Feng Qixiao to fight with Chu Xiu. Moreover, even if he fought with his life, it was useless. In this battle situation, there was no difference between having 2 more real pellet state martial artists and having 2 less real pellet state martial artists. The old man of the Wuxin sword tomb nodded and said, "Are you finally going to make a move? After fighting the old man, we still have to go back and guard the tomb." Compared with others, the nameless old man of the Wuxin sword tomb thought more simply. If you want to fight, then fight. Why so much nonsense? As soon as he spoke, the nameless old man of the Wuxin sword tomb stepped out. His body was surrounded by sword qi as if he was going straight to the sky. Chu Xiu turned to Shang Tianliang and said, "Master Shang, I'll leave it to you." Shang Tianliang nodded blankly. Although he was defeated miserably in front of Rama before, he benefited a lot from fighting with the existence of the mysterious realm. He gradually became familiar with the current fighting style. Shang Tianliang didn't put a real fire spirit refinement state in his eyes. Shang Tianliang's saber intent permeated the air around him, and the formless gang qi around him turned pale green. With a casual wave of his hand, the wind howled furiously in midair, and the dark clouds that filled the sky turned into a long saber that could tear the heavens and split the earth as it slashed down with indomitable might. This was the martial art technique Shang Tianliang had inherited from his ancestors. Back in the Green Capital, this martial art technique had been simplified into the simplest knife hand technique. There was only the saber intent, but no saber form. The might displayed by this slash was the true power of the heavens and earth. Facing an existence of the mysterious realm, the face of the old man of the Wuxin sword tomb didn't change at all. But at this moment, a strange sword light bloomed around him. The power of the sword light wasn't strong. It just condensed into a small sword that hovered behind the old man. However, as the old man pointed out with his sword finger, countless sword auras condensed and gushed out from the small sword. The sword will pierce through the sky and directly condensed into a huge sword shadow in midair, shattering Shang Tianliang's absolute sky-blade. The huge impact from the collision of the sword and the saber caused the ground between the two to crack. A violent aura suddenly erupted. Shang Tianliang's expression didn't change, but the nameless old man opposite him took 3 steps back, but he wasn't injured at all. The next moment, the nameless old man stepped out again. A small sword turned into a complete sword shadow in the sky. In an instant, a trembling sword hum resounded in people's hearts. Even Chu Xiu could feel an extremely sharp feeling tearing his spirit. Chu Xiu had to use the power of his spirit to resist it. Shang Tianliang, who bore the brunt of the attack, let out a furious roar. The green aura around his body swept out like a tornado. His hands pulled and tore forward, as if tearing the heavens and earth apart. No matter what kind of sword chimes there were, he directly tore through the countless sword shadows. Even though Shang Tianliang was now more used to the fighting methods in the Jianghu, his martial arts couldn't change. He still focused on close combat, and his attacks were extremely fierce and violent. Chu Xiu squinted and stared at the nameless old man of the Wuxin sword tomb. The other party was only in the spiritual refinement realm with true fire, but the powerful aura on his body definitely didn't belong to him. Controlling the world with the power of sword qi was definitely a technique that only a powerful sword cultivator in the spiritual refinement realm with true fire could use. How could this old man use it? Lu Jiang, he said in the blood soul bead. If I'm not wrong, this old man should have a sword soul from the Wuxin sword tomb. The Wuxin sword tomb actually invited a sword soul. It seems that they really value you. Sword soul? The soul of a swordsman in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth? Lu Jiang, he shook his head and said, not the soul of a swordsman, but the soul of a sword spirit. There are countless sword cultivators buried in the Wind and Cloud sword tomb, including people from the Wind and Cloud sword tomb, some ancient sword cultivators, and even some rogue sword cultivators with deep attainments in the sword. Before they died, they would sometimes enter the Wind and Cloud sword tomb to bury themselves and their divine swords. The Wind and Cloud sword tomb had never rejected these people. Some of the experts had an extremely close relationship with the sword spirits of their divine weapons. After they died, the sword spirits would dissipate on their own. However, the Wind and Cloud sword tomb is an extremely special place. If the swordsman and the sword spirit dissipate together, the power formed after their dissipation will condense and give birth to an extremely powerful existence, which is the sword soul. The sword soul has some special characteristics of the swordsman when he was alive. At the same time, it is not bound by the sword itself. It is invisible and intangible, but its power is extremely powerful. The master of the sword soul on this old man should be in existence in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. It is normal for it to have such power. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, there are such strange things in the Wind and Cloud sword tomb. Lu Jiang, he snorted softly and said, there are many strange things in the Wind and Cloud sword tomb. Don't look at how few people from the Wind and Cloud sword tomb appear in the pugilistic world. Even 500 years ago, there were not many people in the sacred sect who were willing to provoke the Wind and Cloud sword tomb. They were just a group of gravekeepers, not much of a threat. Who knew what kind of strange things had been bred in that big grave of theirs? The Tao of life and death are 2 types of great Taos in the world. The Wind and Cloud sword tomb is an existence between life and death. However, you can rest assured, no matter how strong the sword soul is, it is just an external object. External objects alone cannot do anything to old Shang. As soon as Lu Jianghe's voice fell, Shen Baochen took out a scroll. When the scroll was unfurled, it was like a painting. There were countless swordsmen dancing in ink. As the ink sword shadows danced in the air, every sword qi pierced through the sky. It was extremely sharp. In an instant, countless sword qi attacked Shang Tianliang. Its power was not inferior to the power of the nameless old man's sword soul. In an instant, Shang Tianliang was under a lot of pressure. Chu Xiu glanced at Lu Jianghe and said indifferently, stop talking. Chapter 904. Although Lu Jianghe was a bit of a jinx, a large sect like the Forgetting Sword Hut definitely had some hidden treasures in their hands. Even if Lu Jianghe had not mentioned the painting scroll that Shen Baochen had taken out, Chu Xiu had heard of it. This item was called the 10,000 Sword Catalog. Starting from the generation of the ancestors of the Forgotten Sword Hut, once someone reached the mysterious realm of the heaven and earth, they would inscribe their own sword intent into it. After all these years, perhaps only the Forgotten Sword Hut itself knew how many people had reached the mysterious realm of the heaven and earth. The 1,000 Sword Catalog had been worshipped by the Forgotten Sword Hut for generations. It was already filled with the power of sword qi. After using it this time, as long as the 1,000 Sword Catalog was not damaged, it could continue to accumulate sword qi for use. Although the 1,000 Sword Catalog could not fight against a true mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it would not be a problem for it to work with the nameless old man from the undistracted sword tomb to stop Shang Tianliang. After all, Shang Tianliang was still injured. Shaking his head gently, Chu Xiu walked directly towards the hidden sword villa. It was not easy to defeat Shang Tianliang with just 2 external objects. This period of time was enough for Chu Xiu to finish off the hidden sword villa. Seeing Chu Xiu walk over, Cheng Tingshan shouted, "Sword array, split open the sky." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hidden sword villa immediately erupted with a shocking power of sword qi. The light of the Tao of formation shone brightly. Hundreds of hidden sword villa elites were scattered in all directions of the sword formation. 6 elders of the hidden sword villa guarded the 6 most crucial positions of the sword formation, while Cheng Tingshan commanded from the center. The biggest difference between the hidden sword mountain villa's sword formation and normal sword formations was that they did not rely on the formation, nor did they rely on the people who set up the formation. Instead, they relied on the long swords that shone brightly in the center of the formation. These swords were god weapons and precious weapons. Now that they were connected together through the array, the power that erupted was extremely shocking. The hidden sword villa had studied sword arrays for thousands of years. Their attainments in this aspect could be said to far exceed the other sword sections. Therefore, when the hidden sword mountain villa took out the sword formation as a trade, the other 3 sects were more or less tempted by it. Chu Xiu looked at the sword formation of the hidden sword villa with interest. To be honest, although in Chu Xiu's eyes, the hidden sword villa was still very weak, a force that had been passed down for thousands of years must have some foundation. This sword formation was one of them. At this moment, in Chu Xiu's eyes, within the sword formation, man and sword and formation, they had already formed a subtle whole. The power between them was interconnected, and the sword intent had already soared into the sky, transforming into a heaven-splitting sword that slashed directly at Chu Xiu. The sword array of the hidden sword mountain villa could be used for both offense and defense. Now that they were facing Chu Xiu, it was either life or death. Since that was the case, why should they care about offense or defense? If they didn't defeat Chu Xiu, no one would be able to live. The Black Tortoise True technique also had a sword technique called the Destiny Sword Dao. Because Chu Xiu had never used a sword before, Chu Xiu had never used this martial art technique before. However, when the Black Tortoise True technique was cultivated to the extreme, all 10 martial arts techniques would be integrated. When they were combined into one, it would be able to explode with even greater power. Therefore, even if Chu Xiu had never used a sword technique before, there was no harm in understanding it now. In an instant, the heavenly war case transformed into a long sword. When the sword fell, there was no majestic sword qi, but there was a different kind of charm in it. The Destiny Sword Dao cultivated not only the sword intent, but also the fate of the heavenly way. When the sword fell, it cut through the power of the rules. The seemingly ordinary sword collided with the majestic sword qi of the hidden sword mountain villa, but an extremely terrifying power erupted. Under Chu Xiu's heavenly mandate sword principle, the huge sword qi actually started to crumble and melt. This caused Cheng Tingshan and the others from the hidden sword villa to be extremely astonished. They knew that Chu Xiu was strong, but no one had heard that Chu Xiu was also good at sword techniques. Using the sword Dao against the sword Dao, they were crushed by Chu Xiu in what they were best at. It was not a good feeling. As the sword qi crumbled and melted, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. He looked relaxed, but his entire body was already burning with the true fire of inner strength to resist the crazily surging sword qi. After all, the sword Dao was not the martial art he was best at. Moreover, the hidden sword Mountain Villa's real trump card, the famous sword formation in the pugilistic world, did not have an undeserved reputation. The powerful sword qi in the sword formation did not contain any foreign power. There was only sword qi, and it was extremely pure and powerful sword qi. Under the attack of the sword qi, even the long sword formed by the heavenly war case was a little unstable, and it made a slight vibration sound. On the other side, Cheng Tingshan gritted his teeth and shouted, "Sword dance!" As soon as he said that, countless sword qis soared through the sky, spreading out in the sky as if they blotted out the sun. They attacked Chu Xiu with whistling gales. Chu Xiu wanted to hone his destiny sword principle, so he wasn't in a hurry. He continued to use the destiny sword principle, a martial technique that he wasn't too familiar with, against the enemy. Although he couldn't destroy the sword formation, he didn't get hurt by it either. After exchanging dozens of blows, Shang Tianliang on the other side snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu brat, stop playing. If you don't get serious, this old man won't play with you anymore." The nameless old man's sword soul, and Shen Baochen's myriad sword catalog had put a lot of pressure on him. He had not recovered from his injuries, but Chu Xiu was leisurely practicing his martial art skills. It was ridiculous. Seeing that Shang Tianliang had begun to protest, Chu Xiu put aside his thoughts of practicing his martial art skills. With a move of his hand, the heavenly war case instantly turned the long sword into a battle saber. The sea-breaking saber of the seven limits slashed out. The fierce and violent saber aura seemed to tear everything apart. Even the air in front of him made a series of ear-piercing explosions. Wherever the saber aura passed, everything was drowned and covered. The saber could be said to be the ultimate power. The power of the saber was the full power of Chu Xiu's attack. The hidden sword Villa, which had just adapted to Chu Xiu's attack, was caught off guard. In an instant, they were almost unable to maintain the sword formation. An elder of the hidden sword Villa immediately exploded, and instantly turned into a cloud of blood mist. The hidden sword Villa's sword formation was mysterious in that the person and the sword had reached a subtle balance. When the sword formation was formed, the person borrowed the power of the sword. When the sword formation was formed, the person could also replace the sword formation to bear the power. However, in this way the sword might be unharmed, but the person would be injured. The elder of the hidden sword Villa had taken the initiative to bear such a large amount of power. Although it reduced the injuries of others, he had also paid the price of his life. Cheng Tingshan roared with red eyes, "Sword shield!" The sword formation changed. In an instant, countless layers of sword qi stacked up and turned into a shield in front of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Your courage is commendable, but it's still a useless sacrifice." A shocking pure devil qi condensed in Chu Xiu's hand, and turned into a huge devil qi bow in front of him. The triple city annihilation arrow shot out. The arrow that carried the power of nirvanic extermination was like a small black dot on the huge sword shield. The blackness seemed to be contagious, growing larger and larger. The sword shield began to gradually collapse and melt. The power of nirvanic extermination had even seeped into the sword formation. Another elder of the hidden sword Villa took the initiative to stand out and bear the majority of the power. In the end, he was directly minced into ashes by the power of nirvanic extermination. After a few consecutive attacks, the hidden sword Villa was already on the verge of collapse. None of the 6 guardian sword pavilion elders were afraid of death. They all rushed to stand out and block Chu Xiu's attack. Unfortunately, in the blink of an eye, 5 of them had already died. To be honest, even Chu Xiu was a little surprised that the fight had reached this level. Now that he had attacked with all his strength, the number of people in the true fire spirit refinement state who could block him could be counted on one hand. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the people from the hidden sword Villa were like ants. He could easily crush them. However, with the sword formation and their courage, they could actually hold on for so long. This really made Chu Xiu look at them in a new light. However, Chu Xiu was not the kind of person who would let his enemies live just because he admired them. An enemy was an enemy. I admire you, but I still have to kill you. When the last elder of the Hidden Sword Villa could not withstand Chu Xiu's attack, and his body exploded, Cheng Tingshan's spirit had completely collapsed. Although the sword in the Hidden Sword Villa's sword formation was more important than the people, if the people were all dead, who could control the sword formation? Cheng Tingshan's eyes were red as he roared, "Sword sacrifice!" The other cultivators who controlled the sword formation looked at Cheng Tingshan in disbelief. This move was almost a suicidal method. It extracted all the power of the divine weapons, and even the sword spirit would be crushed. This was the way to erupt with the greatest power. Once this move was used, the swords would be destroyed and the people would die. The Hidden Sword Villa is going to be gone. What's the use of the swords? Don't you, Chu Xiu, want the flowing light demonic moon? My Hidden Sword Villa would rather destroy these divine swords than leave them to you, Chu Xiu. Although Cheng Tingshan was usually very calculative, at this moment, the crazy killing intent in his heart had already been aroused. He would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. Chu Xiu frowned. The unyielding spirit of Cheng Tingshan and the Hidden Sword Villa was really beyond his imagination. At this moment, Bai Qian suddenly said, "Wait." Chu Xiu looked at Bai Qian and raised his eyebrows. What Sword King City also wants to intervene in this matter? As he said that, Chu Xiu also glanced at Fang Qishao. Fang Qishao also shrugged, meaning that he also didn't know what Bai Qian wanted to do. Bai Qian shook his head and said, "Only a few people from my Sword King City came here. Even if we want to intervene, we can't do anything. I just want to give official Chu a suggestion. What you want is the flowing light demonic moon. There's no need to force the entire Hidden Sword Villa to be destroyed. Although the relationship between the 5 major sword sects isn't close, it won't be good if 2 of them are destroyed at the same time. Official Chu, where it's possible to forgive people, one should forgive people. I'll help you get the flowing light demonic moon, and you leave the Hidden Sword Villa's orthodoxy. What do you think?" Chapter 905. The Sword King City had come here as a bystander. Although the 7th young Master Fang had performed well, it was a pity that some people didn't buy it. Now that Bai Qian had spoken up as a peacemaker, not only did he not want Sword King City to play a supporting role, but he also did not want Hidden Sword Villa to be destroyed. Each of the 5 major sword sects had thousands of years of history. Therefore, although there was competition and intrigue between them, it was not as serious as the other factions. For example, the great battle on Floating Jade Mountain had been instigated by the 5 major sword sections. If it had been any other faction, it would have been impossible for them to join forces and create such a huge commotion. Hidden Sword Villa was already half destroyed, but even so, it was better to leave a good reputation than to be destroyed. Chu Xiu said calmly, "I gave Hidden Sword Villa a chance from the beginning, but some people did not cherish it. They won't shed a tear until they see their coffin." Bai Qian sighed and said to Cheng Tingshan, "Villa Master Cheng, although a swordsman would rather break than bend, a broken sword can be reforged. If the person is gone, then there's nothing left. Hidden Sword Villa has developed for so many years. Are you really willing to watch it be destroyed in your hands? Are you willing to be the last Villa Master of Hidden Sword Villa? Admit defeat. Even if you really die, you will not be a threat to official Chu. Leave a seed for Hidden Sword Villa." Cheng Tingshan smiled sadly and glanced at the other Hidden Sword Villa disciples in the sword formation, whose eyes were either filled with fear or apprehension. Perhaps their Hidden Sword Villa had walked into a dead end from the beginning. Was the person or the sword more important? The Hidden Sword Villa had chosen the latter. In the end, so many people had died for the sake of a sword. If they had admitted defeat from the beginning, would they have ended up like this? Chu Xiu was right. This time, Hidden Sword Villa would not shed a tear until they saw their coffin. It was too late for regrets. Bai Qian's last sentence hit the spot that Cheng Tingshan was most unwilling to face. The Hidden Sword Villa had been passed down for thousands of years. He did not want to be the last master of the Hidden Sword Villa. How would he be able to face his ancestors then? Moreover, Chu Xiu's strength was already so strong that it made people tremble. Even if they were to perish together, Apart from preventing Chu Xiu from obtaining flowing light evil moon, what else could he gain? Bai Qian continued. Manor Lord Cheng, the 5 great sword sects have existed for so many years. You should know what the 5 great sword sects need. Although we usually have conflicts with each other, and everyone wants to be the leader of the 5 major sword sects, as sword cultivators, we wish for the entire sword cultivator lineage to prosper. Compared to letting other random sects become one of the 5 great sword sects, we are more willing to let the hidden sword villa remain in this position. Cheng Tingshan let go. Although your hidden sword villa has suffered a great loss this time, Sword King City can guarantee that if anyone dares to target the hidden sword villa, Sword King City will take action. In the entire Jianghu, the 5 great sword sects had the most special status. There was no conflict between them over orthodoxies, only their dedication to the Sword Dao. The Sword Dao had even become independent of the 3 sects, becoming the largest martial Dao branch in the Jianghu. Of course, this was not the ultimate dream of all sword cultivators. Their ultimate dream was to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Taoists, Buddhists, and demons. That was their ideal golden age of the Sword Dao. So although the 5 great sword sects had always had conflicts, they all worked together to protect the interests and future of the Sword Dao. There were many sword sects among the 7 sects and 8 schools, but why had they not replaced the weakest Yu Maiden Palace as one of the 5 great sword sects? Why had they not become one of the 6 great sword sects? That was because their Sword Dao was not pure. No matter how weak the Yu Maiden Palace and the Hidden Sword Villa were, their Sword Dao legacies had been recognized by other sword sections. The remaining sects like the Ba Mountain Sword Sect and the Azure Water Sword Sect might also have the title of Sword Sect or Sword Sect, but in reality, their Sword Dao legacies were not recognized by other sword sections. So even though the Hidden Sword Villa had declined to this state, before another sword sect appeared that could replace the Hidden Sword Villa, Sword King City would protect the Hidden Sword Villa. This was not just empty talk. Cheng Tingshan sighed. In that instant, he seemed to have aged a dozen years. With a wave of his hand, a long sword flashing with starlight flew out of the sword formation and stabbed in front of Chu Xiu. Flowing light evil moon is yours, Chu Xiu. After barely spitting out these words, Cheng Tingshan seemed to have spat out all his strength. A swordsman would rather break than bend. This time Cheng Tingshan had lowered his head. He had completely embarrassed the Hidden Sword Villa. Although he, like the other 6 elders of the Hidden Sword Villa, was prepared to die, sometimes, living was more difficult than dying. Now that the flowing light evil moon was in his hands, Chu Xiu called out to Shang Tianliang and turned to leave. Chu Xiu was very trustworthy. At present, Chu Xiu could be considered as a big shot who could stir up a storm in the underworld. It was time for him to build up his reputation. Although he didn't need to do any good deeds, at the very least, it would make his credibility more valuable. Of course, more importantly, he had been high-profile enough during this period of time. If he destroyed the Hidden Sword Villa now, he would be even more high-profile, and would almost completely offend the other 3 major sections. After Chu Xiu left, the elder of the Heartless Sword Tomb saw that the matter had been resolved. He did not even say a word and turned to leave. Shen Baochen looked at the pitiful state of the Hidden Sword Villa and shook his head. Back then, during the great battle between the righteous and demonic paths on Floating Jade Mountain, the Hidden Sword Villa was still high-spirited, but now it had weakened to such an extent. This time, the Hidden Sword Villa had suffered heavy losses. Not only had they lost the Flowing Light Evil Moon, but all the elders in the Guardian Sword Pavilion had died. The Hidden Sword Villa had to send a large number of people into the Guardian Sword Pavilion, which was a great blow to their own strength. In the next 10 years, the Hidden Sword Villa would probably not appear in the Jianghu. This made Shen Baochen sigh. This was the result of not having enough strength. In the Jianghu, not having strength was the biggest mistake. After obtaining the Flowing Light Evil Moon, Chu Xiu did not delay and directly brought the Flowing Light Evil Moon to the Mirror Lake Villa. Along the way, news of the battle in the Hidden Sword Villa had spread. Previously, it was not wrong for Chu Xiu to be low-key. This was because after this incident, Chu Xiu had become the focus of the Jianghu again. Countless people were saying that Chu Xiu was arrogant and domineering, and that he was extremely crazy. He had just gone against the Sabodi Zen Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect, and in the blink of an eye, he had gone against the 5 major sword sects. This was simply indescribable. However, there were also many sects that were worried. This Chu Xiu was so unscrupulous and crazy. Would he be a threat to them in the future? Not only did Chu Xiu not earn any reputation, but he had also gained a stronger fear and ferocity than before. Of course, all of this had nothing to do with Chu Xiu. He had already decided that while Mo Yezi was helping him forge the divine weapon, he would stay in the Mirror Lake Manor. One reason was to wait for the divine weapon, and the other was to keep a low profile for a period of time. When Mo Yezi received the flowing light evil moon from Chu Xiu, even he was shocked. Although he had already heard the news of Chu Xiu from some anemophilia, he really did not expect that Chu Xiu would actually be able to obtain the divine sword from the Hidden Sword Villa. The rumor that the Hidden Sword Villa regarded the sword as their life had long been famous in the Jianghu. Even in the early years when Mo Yezi was still the pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, he wanted to borrow the famous sword of the Hidden Sword Villa to collect some inspiration for forging swords. However, he was firmly rejected by the Hidden Sword Villa. In the end, under the threat of Chu Xiu, the Hidden Sword Villa still handed over the flowing light evil moon. It seemed that a person's life was still more important than a sword. Mo Yezi said, "The flowing light evil moon is originally a divine weapon. It will take some effort to melt it. Therefore, if we want to forge the complete version of the Heavenly Tao War Case, I am afraid it will take some time, at least a month." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's just right. I will stay in the Mirror Lake Villa for a period of time." He had been a little too high profile during this time. Although Chu Xiu was now the general trend, he was not ready to really become the public enemy of the martial arts world. Taoism and Buddhism and the 5 major sword sects had been defeated by him one after another. At present, Chu Xiu was in the limelight for a while. If he attracted so many strong people to besiege him like Yi Xiaonan last time, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he would probably die. At this moment, someone suddenly came outside to report that Xiao Baiyu of Jixiao Academy had come to visit. Xiao Baiyu came to the Mirror Lake Villa to find Mo Yezi to forge weapons. Now that Xiao Baiyu had stepped into the true fire spiritual cultivation realm, his power in the Eastern Qi Imperial Court had greatly increased. Jixiao Academy had become the most important part of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu also asked for a lot of materials from the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, and was ready to forge a batch of weapons. Although there were a lot of forging masters in the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, Xiao Baiyu didn't like them. The price of the Divine Weapon Pavilion was too high, so the Mirror Lake Villa was a good choice. Moreover, Xiao Baiyu was Luo Feiheng's teacher, and Mo Yezi was Luo Feiheng's adoptive father. With this important relationship, the relationship between the two sides was also good. Seeing Chu Xiu here, Xiao Baiyu was stunned. It seemed that he didn't expect to meet Chu Xiu here. "Chancellor Xiao, long time no see." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said hello. The other party was Luo Feiheng's teacher. Although he was not familiar with him, there was no hatred between them. Xiao Baiyu also saluted back and said, "I didn't expect official Chu to be here. Are you also going to find Master Mo Yezi to forge weapons?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I just got a magic sword from the sword concealing villa. I'm going to use it to upgrade my weapon." Hearing this, Xiao Baiyu couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Using a magic weapon to upgrade another magic weapon, Chu Xiu really dared to do such a luxurious thing. "And are you sure you got the magic sword from the sword concealing villa instead of robbing it?" Chapter 906. For Chu Xiu, Xiao Baiyu didn't have much bad feeling. The reason was very simple. Standpoint determined everything. Chu Xiu and Luo Feiheng were good friends, and he was Luo Feiheng's teacher. Although he had more than one student, Luo Feiheng was the closest to him. Luo Feiheng. In addition, Xiao Baiyu could only be regarded as half a person in Jianghu. His foundation was on the side of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Most of the time, he stayed in Jixiao Academy to teach disciples. Xiao Baiyu just watched the fights and various disputes in Jianghu, and rarely participated in them. Therefore, he didn't have any bad feeling for Chu Xiu. He was more curious about Chu Xiu's martial arts. After telling Mo Yezi that he was going to forge a batch of weapons, Xiao Baiyu and Chu Xiu sat in the living room and chatted. Official Chu, you are a good friend of Fei Hong, and you are not an outsider. I have something to say, but I don't know whether I should say it or not. Xiao Baiyu suddenly said. Chancellor Xiao, please say it. Xiao Baiyu said in a deep voice. I have heard about what happened in Jianghu recently. Official Chu, you forced Sword Concealing Villa to hand over Flowing Light Evil Moon, which made Sword Concealing Villa suffer a big loss. Everyone is saying that you are very famous, but in fact this is not a good thing. Because some people are saying that your behavior is quite similar to the style of the Kunlun devil cult for 500 years. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his hand, narrowed his eyes, and said, words of criticism. What did the Kunlun devil cult represent? It represented the threat and the era when the people in the evil circle were unscrupulous. Now that someone had linked him to the Kunlun demon sect, it was obvious that someone was trying to purposely lead to a fallacy, causing the entire pugilistic world to view him, Chu Xiu, as an enemy. In the end, they might even join forces to kill him. Of course, these were just an idea. After all, Chu Xiu had become the general trend. It was impossible to kill Chu Xiu without bleeding. Moreover, Chu Xiu couldn't find out who the person who said those words was because he had too many enemies. Not to mention enemies, even if he didn't have any enmity with them, there were many people who didn't like him. How could he find out? Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, many thanks for Chancellor Zhao's information. I also know that I have been rather high profile during this period of time, so I have decided to stay in the Mirror Lake Manor during this period of time, and wait for Great Master Mo Yezi to finish forging the weapon for me. When Xiao Baiyu heard Chu Xiu's words, he couldn't help but nod. Chu Xiu could come to this position from an insignificant person. Of course, he was not an idiot. He knew when to be radical and when to be low-key. Even if he didn't say these words, Chu Xiu could feel it himself. And when he heard that Chu Xiu was going to stay in Mirror Lake Villa for a period of time, Xiao Baiyu also became interested. He said excitedly, Official Chu, I happen to have nothing to do recently. I wonder if you would like to deduce martial arts with me? In terms of combat effectiveness, although Xiao Baiyu had now reached the real fire spiritual realm, he was probably not as good as Chu Xiu, who had already practiced the real fire body refining realm. However, in terms of understanding and attainments in martial arts, Xiao Baiyu, who had studied countless martial arts classics and had students all over the world, was far better than Chu Xiu. Even few people in the whole Jianghu were qualified to compete with Xiao Baiyu. This was the real Wu Dao Grandmaster. He was interested in Chu Xiu because of Chu Xiu's simultaneous cultivation of Taoism, Buddhism and demon. Throughout the history of the Jianghu, there were many people who practiced several martial arts at the same time, but some people had to worry about the conflict of martial arts of different attributes. Even if they overcame the conflict, they still had to worry about the impact between the martial arts. After all, the state of mind of the demon martial arts was definitely different from the state of mind of Buddhism martial arts. Even if you could overcome these things, there was still the complementarity between martial arts and so on. It was possible that you practiced two martial arts at the same time, and as a result, you found that the effect was not as good as specializing in one martial art. Therefore, most of the martial artists in the Jianghu actually only specialized in one martial art. It was not that they couldn't, but there were too many restrictions, and it was not cost-effective. At present, the martial artists who had reached the real pellet state in the Jianghu had learned a variety of martial arts, but only Chu Xiu could master everything. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu was really curious about Chu Xiu and wanted to discuss with him how he practiced. For Xiao Baiyu's request, Chu Xiu was also very happy. His own attainments in martial arts were obvious, but Chu Xiu didn't think that others were inferior to him. Especially in martial arts, combat power was combat power, and understanding of martial arts was understanding. Deducing martial arts with Xiao Baiyu, a grandmaster with high attainments in martial arts, was also very good for Chu Xiu's own understanding of martial arts. Therefore, for almost a month, Chu Xiu spent his time deducing and discussing with Xiao Baiyu. Although Chu Xiu almost didn't practice in this month, he could feel that his understanding of martial arts had improved. As the dean of Jixia Martial Arts Academy, although Xiao Baiyu was not as proficient in the martial arts of Taoism, Buddhism and demon as Chu Xiu, he had a deep understanding of the martial arts of these three branches. In Xiao Baiyu's view, among the martial artists of Taoism, Buddhism and demon, Taoism emphasized the nature of heaven and earth and was the most moderate and peaceful. Buddhism cultivated the power of yang and Buddha's light, which was the sum of the extreme yang between heaven and earth. The demonic cultivation method was extremely evil, which was the collection of all the negative forces in the world. These three kinds of cultivation methods themselves evolved from the power between heaven and earth. There was no good or evil, but there were differences in their attributes. In Xiao Baiyu's view, Chu Xiu was able to practice all these three kinds of cultivation methods to great success, or even the extreme. This had a great relationship with Chu Xiu's state of mind. In the eyes of others, Chu Xiu was a devil and his behavior was extremely evil. But in Xiao Baiyu's view, Chu Xiu was not a good person, but you couldn't say that he was absolutely a bad person. In his heart, there was only himself, and there was no good or evil. In his heart he didn't believe in Buddha. In his hand, the devil was the blade. Taoism followed the law of nature, and so did people. For a long time, Chu Xiu regarded all kinds of martial arts cultivation methods as a tool to increase his own strength. Only he controlled the cultivation method. Of course, he would not be affected by the cultivation method. A month later, Master Mo Yezi also completely promoted the natural law war case to the peak state in the blueprint, and Chu Xiu was ready to leave Eastern Qi. But at this time, Luo Feiheng came to him. Seeing Luo Feiheng's anxious look, Chu Xiu couldn't help but ask, "What happened to the 9-branch hall?" Xiao Baiyu also asked, "Did someone come to trouble you again?" Last time in the Sun family, Sun Changming of the Sun family made trouble for Luo Feiheng, but was stopped by Xiao Baiyu. Since then, many people in Jianghu also knew the relationship between Luo Feiheng and Xiao Baiyu. They were not an ordinary disciple and teacher, but similar to the relationship between a master and a disciple. A teacher for a day is a father for a lifetime. Master and teacher meant completely different things. Xiao Baiyu had students all over the world, but there were only a few who could really be regarded as his disciples. Luo Feiheng shook his head and said, "It's not my problem, but Mo Tianlin is in trouble. Usually he seems to be gentle, but I didn't expect him to be so stubborn." When the Mo family was in trouble, he didn't ask for help immediately, but even wanted to shoulder the responsibility himself. When Luo Feiheng mentioned Mo Tianlin, Chu Xiu remembered that he hadn't seen Mo Tianlin for a long time. This was also related to Chu Xiu's realm rising too fast. Those who dealt with him were all above the martial Dao Grand Master. There were even powerhouses of the heaven and earth mystic realm. Mo Tianlin hadn't reached the real pellet state yet. In theory, he was still a younger generation, so it was naturally impossible to have too much interaction with Chu Xiu. Of course, this didn't mean that Mo Tianlin was weak. It could only be said that the strength of Chu Xiu's generation was too abnormal. Mo Tianlin was only in his early 30s this year, and his strength had already reached the peak of the unity of nature and man. Those who stepped into the real pellet state before the age of 40 were considered to be extremely talented. Mo Tianlin? Did something happen to the Shangyang Mo family? Even if my face isn't useful, didn't you go to the Blue Dragon Society to ask for help? At present, Chu Xiu's forces could be said to be all over the underworld. He and Mo Tianlin were good friends. Many people knew that if someone wanted to touch Mo Tianlin, they had to give Chu Xiu face. Of course, Chu Xiu wasn't arrogant to the point that everyone in the underworld had to give him face, but Luo Feiheng's 9-branch hall itself wasn't weak. Even if the 9-branch hall was useless, then Luo Feiheng could go to the Blue Dragon Society to find support. Luo Feiheng's face was a little ugly. It was the Xiahou clan who did it. I don't know why the Xiahou clan is crazy. It seems like they want to completely destroy the Mo family, but I asked Mo Tianlin. The Mo family has been very low-key recently. They didn't provoke the Xiahou clan at all. I didn't even see Xiahou Zhen's face when I showed up. Later, I asked Senior Duanmu Qianshan to help, but the Xiahou clan's old ancestor personally refused. His attitude was abnormally tough. I really have no other way, so I can only come to you to solve it. Hearing Luo Feiheng's words, Chu Xiu frowned suddenly. After a pause, Chu Xiu said, "Something is wrong. Mo Tianlin's Mo family is the weakest among the 9 great families. It basically has no threat. If there is no absolute reason, why would the Xiahou clan want to destroy the Mo family? Is it simply crazy? Most importantly, the Xiahou clan's attitude is too unyielding. It's unyielding to the point of being unbelievable. They didn't give face to Luo Feiheng, nor did they give face to the Blue Dragon Society. The Xiahou clan should know that the Blue Dragon Society has made an appearance. What does this mean? Is the Xiahou clan really not afraid of me? Or is it because they have something to rely on? There must be some hidden story behind this. Since the situation has reached this point, Chu Xiu didn't delay. He brought Luo Feiheng and Chu Xiu directly to the Mo family. No matter what, he and Mo Tianlin were good friends, so he couldn't just ignore this matter. Moreover, he also wants to see why the Xiahou clan wouldn't give him face. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.